Hi, I'm Wendi Phan. I'm so excited for you to join me today. We are going to travel to different gardens to see how they trellis their plants, and I'll show you a few DIY projects so that you can get building in your own garden. Let's start by going over some basics about trellises because in this session, trellising will be made simple for you. What is a trellis? A trellis is when you take a framework to reinforce plants, guiding them to grow a certain way. In this session, you will learn the various types of materials that you can use to support your plants. In this photo, is an example of a gardener using bamboo stakes to support these green bean climbing plants. This is one of the common ways used to build trellises in Asia, which I will talk more about in a little bit. Trellis uses in the garden. When it comes to trellising, we often think of using it to support climbing plants, but there are more reasons why we should implement trellises in the garden. First, it can help you save space. Guiding plants on a trellis would allow them to grow vertically, which prevents plants from blocking pathways and taking up a lot more room in the garden. The overall appearance is just a lot more tidy and organized when plants have their own space and homes to grow into. It's especially important for farms and home gardeners that want to maximize their space to grow climbing vegetables vertically. I strongly encourage to guide vines or plants that have trailing behavior to climb on a structure so that it opens up more space on the bottom and around the trellis so that you can grow more food. In this photo, the trellis are set up in rows. You can see that these young plants are about to take off and they're going to be taken off pretty soon and grabbing onto the trellis, making their way up. If there is nothing for them to climb on, can you imagine how fast they would grow and sprawl all over the ground with nowhere to walk? This makes it difficult to maintain the space and to prune the plants on a regular basis. You can see how the paths between the rows are kept clear for foot traffic. When maintenance, pruning, fertilizing, or even harvesting is needed, you would be so glad that there's an easy way to access these plants. Especially for someone like me who doesn't have a strong back, I like to avoid bending over as much as possible. By having plants grow vertically, it makes the job a lot easier. I also love trellises that form an arbor. It is so much easier to harvest when fruits dangle from the above. Number 2. Growing on a trellis can help minimize pests and fungal diseases. Plants that are more prone to attracting pests or other kind of fungal related issues when they trail on the ground. That's why cucumbers, squashes, gourds, and melons, even green beans are encouraged to grow on a trellis because these are the type of plants that are most prone to fungal diseases. When trellising your plants to grow vertically, it would actually improve the airflow to minimize diseases. And that is, of course, if you do some regular pruning so that the plants would not overcrowd each other. Fruits that have direct contact with the ground is more likely to rot, especially if the ground stays moist for a long time. Fruits can also get bitten by pests or critters if they're touching the ground. You can see in this photo the trellises are all ready for the plants. Once they start taking off, they're going to climb up and avoid touching the ground. Number 3. Trellising can help improve lighting. When plants are guided to grow vertically, they can get more sunlight, which is essential when it comes to growing plants that produce fruits. In my personal experience, trellising to provide more sun is extremely important when you grow in a narrow space. When plants are guided to grow vertically, it prevents them from blocking or even overcrowding their neighboring plants. Growing in my narrow garden, I've really learned not to let plants shade off each other because that lack of sun can cause the plants to stretch and have very weak stems. Sometimes they won't even have enough energy to produce flowers or fruits. This photo is showing the bitter gourds growing and climbing on the trellises. As the bitter gourd starts to make their way up the trellis, they will receive more sunlight. They will also create some shade for the plants below them. Number 4, having a trellis can help protect your plants much easier. A trellis makes a great structure for adding any kind of protections for your plants. For example, when spring comes around, you know that the garden will be burst with new growth and the new growth of pests. That's almost unavoidable. And to prevent them from damaging your plants, it is so easy to place a screen netting over a trellis, and the trellis would act as a frame that you can clamp the screen on. And on those hot days, a shade cloth can be clamped or tied to the trellis. And for those cold days, a cloth can be used to keep the plants warm, especially for young vines that you want to get an early start and keep them warm inside the cloth. Once they start taking off, the trellis will be there ready for them to start climbing on. Like the photo you see here, I've assembled a large plant cage to support this spiky plant. Whenever needed, I can easily place a screen or any kind of cloth over it and clamp it onto the existing trellis, and it would be like a little house for the plant. Number 5, I think trellises make a garden look more attractive. They add personality to the growing space, and they just make the garden look more unique. I love that the trellises add more architectural interest. You can also use something like a lattice to grow vines on. That would create a beautiful natural screen that helps to divide your space. Once a divider is in place, it will create 2 types of lighting conditions for your plants. One side will receive more sun, while the other side will receive more shade. Both sides will receive sun at different times of the day, which will allow you to grow plants with different sun requirements. This photo shows a trellis that was created for growing loofahs and melons. It is a 2-tier trellis. The trellis in the front receives sun in parts of the morning, then it gets some shade later in the day. In this design, plants that need more sun and room to grow can use the taller tier. When the vine fills this trellis, this would become the focal point of the garden. Now, if you want to take that extra step for aesthetic purposes so that your trellis can blend more with your decor, you can even paint it or apply texture over it. Now let's talk about the different materials that you normally see being used to make trellises. Bamboo. It grows abundantly in Southeast Asia. It is in the grass family, grows fast, and very sustainable to use. They have a wide range of usage, varying from making scaffoldings for construction sites to making furnitures and, of course, trellises. Bamboos are flexible to work with when fresh. It comes in different lengths and thicknesses. It also is waterproof, so it makes it really great for supporting plants. This trellis pattern is a very common design used throughout Asia. Placing bamboo stakes in a crisscross fashion to form a row, then using strings to hold them together. Vines such as beans, bitter melons, or any kind of lightweight gourds can be able to climb onto these easily without much of your guide. The style of trellising can be easily set up and taken down during every growing season. If bamboo is not available, you can use tree branches to substitute. Wooden structures can be built to any size needed. I generally turn to wood when I want to build something that can support larger and heavier plants and fruits such as loofahs or gourds. Although wood will eventually rot out, they should still last at least close to 10 years if not longer, and that depends on how heavy the rainfall is. The wooden trellis that I will be doing more show and tell later in this session has been in a home garden for 15 to 20 years. This trellis is made with just pine wood, and it can support extremely heavy gourds. If you want outdoor structures to last for a long time, you can invest in redwood or cedar wood, which would be more resistant to rot and repelling pests. The way how these home garden structures are assembled are really simple. They mainly are using screws and nails or even just strings to tie them together. Here's an example of how you can use a wooden log in the most simple way. These logs were planted in the ground to stabilize, then the dragon fruits were planted around the base of the logs. These plants will eventually grow aerial roots to attach themselves onto the logs. I have never seen any trellises as simple as this idea when it comes to growing dragon fruits. Concrete. If you're looking for a structure that is extremely long-lasting and it can create a pretty unique shape, concrete can be an option. Now, concrete is heavy to work with, and you will be required to dig a hole to plant the structure in place. The style will take more effort than other trellises that I've shown so far, but the result will look very striking. As you can see, this is a totally unique piece. The downside to this is that once you build something in concrete, it's going to be pretty permanent unless the structure is demolished. Like the dragon fruit trellises you're seeing here, they really give an interesting look in this space, and they'll be able to handle very heavy dragon fruits as they grow up this trellis. Reclaimed materials. Incorporating different materials throughout the garden or in a single structure can bring a lot of personality. I love seeing creative gardeners repurposing and modifying something that's no longer have use and turn them into something purposeful and one of a kind. In this photo, you're seeing old tires being used as the top pieces to support the dragon fruit trellis. White stands are old pipes with cement poured in to fill. In the front, there is a metal structure that was placed for extra support. It looks like more parts will be added to the structure as the plants keep growing. The design will keep evolving as the plants continue to grow. Metal. I have made trellises using different materials, and metal by far has been my favorite. Whether if you're building a metal structure in large or small scale, it stays strong, steady, and long-lasting. This photo was taken on a farm in Hong Kong. They were growing honeysuckle vines for tea on this large metal structure. This vine can grow extremely thick and heavy, but the structure had no issues supporting the weight. When the vines fill in, it creates shade for those hot summer days for those plants underneath and the seating area. Plants that grow well in this type of trellis are grapes, beans, gourds, melons, as it can support very heavy weight and densely grown vines. To create something similar to this at home, I use metal pipes that you can get at home improvement stores. They are called EMT conduits, usually are found in the electrical department. The conduits have a zinc coating to prevent corrosion, and it's been a few years since I've built my first metal structure, and there's been no signs of corrosion or rust on the conduits. If you're looking to create a curve on the conduit, you can use a conduit bender to achieve something similar to the trellis in this photo. To assemble the parts together, it's actually really easy to do. Let me show you during the show and tell session in just a little bit. Here are more examples of metal trellises. The photo on the left shows a sphere mesh with roses wrapping to take on the shape. I love that the roses would still have good airflow inside the sphere, but it gives it a very full look on the outside. And to achieve this look, you just need to get something like the ladder mesh, which is found at the home improvement store in the construction section. And you can tie or use zip ties and to bend the mesh to form this sphere. In the middle photo, I took a metal grid wall panel to let the vines grow over. Currently, this panel is set against the wall. By turning this into a divider or a screen, I just need to place it in an open area with the panel installed in the ground. By doing that, I'll be creating shade for one side and sun on the other side for plants with different lighting requirements. The photo on the right, the grower had placed a metal frame of what looks like a table frame to allow the plant to grow through and cascade over. This is a great use of something that is no longer needed, and you can turn it into something useful and beautiful. If you ever need a trellis, I encourage you to start looking at what you have first. Sometimes a piece like this can be found on the side of the street or even at the swap meet. These pieces create such unique shapes and it really adds personality to your garden. Strings. When it comes to using strings to support your plants, you can either train them on a single string or allow plants to climb on a net. Normally, we would first start by building a basic frame for the strings to be tied on. Let's talk about using a single string to support your plants. Plants that can benefit in this type of support system would be your tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, or bush beans, anything that grows more like a bush but tend to be a little more on the floppy side can use this simple type of support just by attaching the string to the top of the frame, allowing the other end of the string to dangle down, and you just clip the stems onto these strings. Now the second method to using the strings is to braid it or to tie knots to make it into a netting. You can also purchase these. They're pretty inexpensive and they're very long lasting if you buy the kind that are made with nylon. I generally prefer using materials that are more biodegradable such as cotton or jute strings, but due to these being outside, they tend to break sometimes even in the middle of the season, and you don't want your plants to lose their support while they're growing on the trellis. You can attach the netting on a very simple frame or even on the side of your house or the roof of the porch to create a wall or a screen for your seating area or just to create more shade on one side. A netting style trellis is really great for plants with tendrils such as the natural climbers like the cucumbers, the loofahs, the gourds, the beans, bitter melons. Like the photo on the left, I tied knots to make the netting for the loofah trellis using nylon strings. The nettings gave the loofah plant the support to get to the top. When they reach to the top, they'll get more sun, and that's when the flowers will start to produce and the fruits will form and dangle down. The photo on the right shows a farm using bamboos to make the trellises. They've added the netting over the bamboo to give the vines something to grab onto. The bamboo is there to give structure to the growing area, and the netting is what is actually giving the plants the support. Plastic. This is a very lightweight material and usually is helpful in supporting plants that do not have heavy, large fruits. You will find some simple trellis kits that are made of plastic. These are usually made easy for assembling, and it's great for beginners. If you're looking for a fast way to support any wobbly plants, these green garden stakes can be easily found at many stores and nurseries. These stakes are made with thin metal pipes inside with the plastic coatings. You can simply use just 3 to 5 of these stakes and tie the top to make a teepee for the plants to wrap around. These teepee-style frames are often used in Vietnam for supporting young trees. In order to give some extra support to these trees, they're using some thick branches to form the teepee instead of using things like the garden stakes that I recommended. Those are better for vines and more lightweight plants. The purpose of these more heavy-duty teepees are meant to support younger trees, newly planted trees, and to keep the tree straight, and especially for those high wind conditions. Even though this frame is made for supporting a tree, all they're using is a piece of string to tie the tree and the teepee together. You can even add bars to a ladder to grow vines around the tree. You can even make a teepee-style trellis using just one garden stake, then wrap a netting over it. And on the bottom, I'm securing it with some Thriving Design Seabees clamps, which I'll talk a little bit more about it shortly. But really, you can just use something like a string or a zip tie to tie things together. A teepee is just a really fun way to grow your peas and beans. If you want to make a more intricate design, you can use zip ties or strings to tie the stakes together, or you can use clamps that's showing in this photo. These are designed to help connect these garden stakes together. These clamps have such a strong grip that the trellis I built 3 years ago is still holding together. Although I don't think there is only one way to do something, but when a design is made to do a particular task, I often do think that they work so much better than hacks. The photo on the right is a plant cage made of plastic. It is lightweight and is flexible enough to make it easy to assemble even with a plant that's already existing. What I like about kits is that they are easily assembled and to be taken down whenever you don't need them. Now let's go see how the gardeners from different places are utilizing trellises for their gardens. I grow in a narrow garden. It's 6 feet wide by 50 feet long. When space is so limited, there is nowhere else to grow but up. This is why I began obsessing about trellising. Now I want to show you the first trellis. Here's the Forever Garden plant cage. I'm using the large one here. You can see, even though it was still a little difficult for me to put this together, but it made such a difference after putting this trellis to help with this plant. This is a massive vine called Barbados gooseberry, and it is part of the cactus family, so it can stab you if you're not careful. That's why I really love that this cage can be assembled. This made it possible to build around this crazy plant. Now let's see how this cage is built. The tomato cages have 3 sizes, so we're gonna use all 3 of them right now. Each box contains 1 size that you can make 3 tomato cages with. This is the largest size with the tallest stakes, but you can also make it even taller by using the connectors. Right now we're going to be building with these tomato cages, but we're gonna do something a little different here. I'm gonna build more like a long form, so I'm gonna separate these, the trellis, and kind of make like a more long, like a fence style rather than like a round cage. So we got these stakes. The bottom is kind of pointy, so you can see that they kind of just butt up, and like that's how you would do a normal cage. But right now we are going to do it a little differently. I feel like I have a better grip if I put some gloves on. I'm just kind of like hack this and make it into a different style. So you can just kind of lay it out and see how you like it. I'm going to do it like this, so it kind of looks like a wave. So that's one. Okay, so I'm kind of turning it to a different kind of shape. So you can see how I've turned it into like a roller coaster looking thing. And then the next part is basically putting these stakes on. So they go on these little U-shaped spots here. This would be a type of trellis that's better for more lightweight plants like your cucumbers, beans, not beans, but peas. So you can see you can kind of just build along to sort of act as a fence for as long as you want it to be, or you can start the second level. See how there's this little bump up here because I cannot push it any deeper, but that's okay. It's still on there pretty solid for the type of plants, lightweight plants that you'll be growing. And the reason for this not being able to go all the way down is because its original design is meant for it to make a circle. It's a tomato cage. The second level, I'm going to extend this pole so that I can make it taller in the back. It's pretty simple. You just attach them together like that. Doesn't this remind you of a roller coaster? You can start the vines, you know, going from the bottom, and it goes zipped up, and then you can actually have the second level. Ta-da! So we got a little roller coaster thing going on here. So you can see you can be quite playful and creative with however, you know, kind of like waves that you want to make this to be. And I can totally see this with something more lightweight growing on here, such as your cucumbers or sweet potatoes, even though sweet potatoes, you know, can grow and just kind of trail along the ground. If you're looking for a really sturdy, heavy-duty cage, this is a cattle panel. They sell these in sheets at Tractor Supplies. You would need a truck to take this home, or you can have them deliver as well. But you can see this is so heavy duty. You basically just take that sheet and wrap it around or cut it to size that you want it, and then you just make a circle with it and you use it to wrap it together. If not, you can always just use zip ties. Zip tie is also a simple way to do it, but just be careful with that because it is plastic after all. Even if you use the ones that are you know, UV resistant, if it's out in the sun beating it all summer long or throughout the years, it might snap. So just be mindful of that. If it snaps, I mean, I don't know if this thing is just gonna bust open like that and can cause injury. But yeah, I would prefer putting it with like strapping it with wire instead, and you have yourself a very sturdy tomato cage or whatever cage you want this to be. And it has a nice size hole in between so that you can just go in very easily and grab your fruits. Here's an example of the cattle panel that's used to make an archway. You can see it's, because it's pretty thick gauge, this would allow you to grow some more heavy things like medium-sized pumpkins or some squashes, butternut squashes on here. Loofahs can grow as here as well. I just love the way how this arch looks. Just a very simple way, as you can see, is just there is just one sheet of the cattle panel and the ground, and then you can put stakes on here. Actually, just get the stake into the ground and then zip tie or use wires to kind of hold up this sheet, and it just wraps around to the bottom, and then this side would also have the stakes, and then you can attach them that way. Here's another really creative use of the cattle panels. Look on top here. Look how this beautiful wave it creates, and it's just attached to that part of the roof onto the EMT conduit. And it just creates a really beautiful, really cool architecture. If you can't get a cattle panel, you can also get these at your big box store. As you can see, the gauge is much thinner than the cattle panels, but they come in a roll, and it would be so much easier to take home if you have a smaller car. It definitely wouldn't be as strong, but you'll be able to grow beans just fine. To add extra support, I use these ladder mesh that would be found in the concrete section at your big box store. They're pretty inexpensive, and you can attach them to add some extra support. To attach this arch, I've used these metal stakes. Let's take a look at how I built this trellis. This is one that's made using the Thriving Design C bites. Very simple to do. You just snap them on wherever you want the two stakes to attach. For example, you can put them out like this. You can put these hooks together like that. You can even do this and turn it like that. So it's really simple to attach onto this. I like to go on it at an angle and then put it in. And the other one, and they both could connect like so. To customize this to the size you want, you can simply just saw this off. See, after you saw, it's just gonna be, the stick is actually wrapped with metal and it's hollow inside. After you saw it, I love these caps. And you can simply put this cap on for safety. There's a few different plant supports that I put in this section. The first one is the one on the back side. It's just a very simple build so that I can attach the netting on it. And that's how I have the broad beans growing on it. Then you got the middle ground. The middle, I had some yukons, which are these ones here. This one is still doing really well, but there's a lot of them that finished off. These ones, when I first planted them, the yukons were kind of leaning back. And I didn't want that because I really wanted everything to stand really straight so they get efficient light. Instead of using a string to support every one of the plants, I figured it's best to just use one stake, just all align the backside so that it just naturally would just force all the plants to move forward to straighten it up. And then the front, I got another stake running across. I wanted the support for this so that everything would just be more neat and just a better airflow overall. I wanted to grow a squash and squashes trail. The squash is just following the stake and continue to trail to the other side where it starts to meet with a different kind of trellis. Here's one of the trellises that I made using the Seabees. This one was placed in 2 summers ago. Yeah. So it started off as the lower tier and then it would climb up to the top. And this portion was for the honeydew and the sweet potatoes. The honeydew the first year and then the sweet potatoes came in the second year and utilized this shorter tier. And then this higher one was for the loofah gourds. So they're climbing on this one. And even though it can get a little bit like it sways, but it's kind of nice because it gets quite windy out here. So it would sway with the wind. And yeah, it's been staying intact. And then I was able to put the netting on this one side here for this is where the loofah started, with climbing up here. And then it went up to the top like that. As you can see that you can utilize the Seabees to snap on all your garden stakes to make anything you want pretty quickly. So the last time that the loofah grew here, it was trailing over here on the Seabees trellis and then eventually made its way up because this tree wasn't trimmed at that time. So you can also utilize your trees if you already have them growing. They're just really great and natural way to kind of blend in with nature. But just make sure that it is not going to be too high up that you can't get to the fruits. Now, if you're looking for a trellis that can hold hundreds of pounds of gorge or squashes, this is it. This trellis has been here for well over 10 years, I think, if not 15 years or longer. And it's just a pretty simple structure, as you can see, but it holds hundreds of pounds. There's been gourds and squashes grown here over the years, winter melon being the heaviest kind. Each melon weighs 20 to 30 something pounds, and that is just the average weight. They usually get about 40 to 50 melons to harvest just off of one trellis. Let's come a little closer to see how the structure is built. You got the post here. These posts, they're using a slightly smaller than the 2x4s, but I think 2x4s would work as the post. And then the ones on the top running this direction are the 1x2, so they're a little smaller than the ones used for the post. And then you got even some, it looks like it's like a 1x1, so it's a little more block shape going this way. It's so you can see nothing is too uniformed, but it can still hold for over a decade. Let's take a look at how the structure was built. Come on down. Now, all the posts are just buried 15 inches deep into the earth, just directly in soil. There's no concrete that was poured in it or anything like that. But this post here is a special one because it wasn't very stable, just because it was really difficult to dig anymore by hand. So what was done is just by using these like a few 4 metal stakes and just basically pound it into the ground by having these metal stakes. So it kind of acts as a brace for this post. This would make the post a lot more sturdy. Let's come back up. The ones on top going this direction are the 1x2, and looks like it's the 1.5 by 1.5, so a little more like a block shape. That is being secured with a screw where the post and the top piece meets. And then there are even some ropes and strings tying the top pieces together. When you're looking on going this direction, they're using these tree branches from the garden and even bamboo stakes. And they all basically are tied here on the intersections with some strings. Here's the other trellis. You can see that the posts here are held up by, looks like more like an A-frame, just for extra support if needed, because this side I think gets a little more wind than the other side. So the trellis tend to sway a little bit. The only time you screw things on is where the post meets with the top frame. When crafts are grown vertically, they're so much easier to manage. They also can get more sun. It's a better use of space, and also they won't have as much rotting or disease and pest sort of issues. Whereas growing in the ground, they're more likely to catch bugs or diseases and experience rotting. I'm now in Vietnam. This is the opal that they have it climbing on this trellis. These vines are growing on a bamboo trellis. Each bamboo is tied together by strings. The bar that you're seeing that runs across is actually a piece of wood that they've drilled holes onto so that the strings can be fed through easily. Finally, there is a netting that's attached to the entire structure. As you can see, you don't always need to have very technical skills to build a sturdy structure for your vines. If you're looking for something really sturdy and heavy duty, this is the Maker Pipe Conduit Connectors. This is the EMT conduit that you can pick up at any big box stores like Home Depot or Lowe's. It is super easy to build, and then at the end you get these to connect up, and then you'll get pretty much anything you want to build, really. This one here, the original parts I purchased were these connectors. And these connectors are really great. They're really sturdy. However, once they're in place, you can see how it is really difficult to take apart. Say later on you want to change the design. Maker Pipe, they make it so easy for you to do that. Here's a little tool that I use to cut the conduits to size, just like that. And then you turn this to adjust it to fit. You just keep rotating this thing just round and round until it cuts through. That will get you to the size that you want. And then to connect the pieces, there's different kind of connectors. I only have 2 to show you right here, but they make all different kinds so that you can pick the correct ones to help you with your design. This one, for example, is the one I use the most, and all you have to do is to put it like that and it would just cup it. See how it's like a puzzle? It also comes with these nuts and screws. Screw this on. Just get a little started here, and then so you can see it is really strong. This part is actually for another piece of conduit. After you cut it, they make these caps and you can just put it on like that sometimes. There. So it's nice and safe for the end parts. But I'm going to use this side since it's open. I can just put this on like that. You can see you can be as creative as you want and to build pretty much anything you want just by using different types of connectors that they have. And I love that you can take these out and reuse the parts. Here's another style. This is more like a 3-way connectors. This type of connector would allow you to go in multiple directions, one on this side and the other one on this side. You can see this example can easily replace this connector that I put up years ago. This is a shelf that I've built using the different types of connectors. Here's the recent build using just the Maker Pipe connectors with the conduits. You can see this one, I completely cut it down to size and then use that end cap and just use this two-way connector to connect both directions. This one is for using the string method to trellis the plants, and right now the tomatoes, even though it's winter, it's growing beautifully on this. If you're looking for a trellis that's very long-lasting and sturdy, definitely consider something that's a metal structure. As you can see, you can make a trellis with any kind of materials, but if you're ever feeling unsure, ask yourself these questions. How heavy are the plants that need support? How long do I want the trellis to last? Or do I want a trellis that can be easily assembled and disassembled? Then refer back to the session and pick one that would suit your garden the best. I hope this session has been helpful to you. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you again.